Thank you all for being here for our March 2022 work session. It's hard to believe we're that far into the year already. Ms. Kinzer, we'll call the roll.
Ms. Parker, Ms. Kinzer, Mr. Harlan, Mr. Fulbright.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Present.
Ms. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Here.
Mr. Hooper.
Here.
Mr. Howell.
Here.
Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Dudley.
Okay, we've got 7 here. Thank you all for attending tonight as we look forward to planning for our next meeting. I'm going to take the opportunity to spread a little news I just found out 2 hours ago, and this does affect our district. Shaq Mason was traded from the New England Patriots to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so he'll once again be blocking for Tom Brady. And when he sends us all those warm videotaped messages, they'll be coming from sunny Florida instead of snowy New England. So just read that as it popped up on the phone here a little bit ago. But we do wish him well. We're proud of him no matter where he plays, and this way he might get another Super Bowl ring. All right, we have several items on our consent. We're just going to move over them and go to new business. Our salary study. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Gerard.
Good evening. At the last work session, we had Steve and Beth here from Burris, Thompson & Associates. If I got that correctly? Okay. And it was asked for them to relook over the benefits. I sent that information to you all today. It's also attached to your agenda. Ms. Kinzer asked for the paper copy, so it's been provided. If you all need the paper copy, there is one down there. So I will let them talk. One other thing I would like to say that's kind of lumped into this was the vacation holiday policy as well. The board member who asked for that to be put on the agenda is not here tonight and asked for that to actually be moved towards the next work session. So just so you all know, and without further ado, I'll hand it over to you all.
Good evening. Well, thank you for having us back. And so as requested, we have taken a look at the benefits for the Maury County Public School System, as well as a number of other districts, and compared those with a salary survey benefits report that we do ourselves every couple of years with public sector employers, and national data that we collect from a national survey. So as you'll see in the report that Jennifer forwarded to you, in the health benefits area, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. That would take a lot of time and waste your time and ours. But basically in this, overall, Maury County does pay the premiums for employee-only coverage, and so the employees themselves do pay less than typical other employers' employees pay. But on the family coverage side, the premiums are either between 8 and 32% higher than the average cost for other employees around the country and other employees within the state on the family coverage side. Now, we only compared one of the plans. In the group that we looked at 16 other school districts. 12 of those use the same plans you guys do. You're on the Tennessee state plans. And so we could compare exact, apples to apples comparison. Some of the other ones use some custom plans that are a little different, so it wasn't quite exact, so we picked the one that was the closest. And on the other salary surveys, we just compared with a regular PPO plan, which was very similar. So across the board, your employee's family coverage is higher here than it is at other employers typically. Your co-pays are slightly higher, not very much, just a couple of dollars, but your deductibles are lower. So overall, your health plan is generally equivalent, because while they have to pay a little bit higher month to month for the family coverage, their deductibles are a little lower. So overall, at the end, it probably washes out. Dental insurance is a typical coverage that most employers provide as well. Premiums are generally low for this, so they're about, typically about the same no matter where you go. so they're about average. And most employers provide very similar coverage. Typical evaluation, your evaluation and your cleanings are covered, and then other benefits such as, cavities, root canals, things like that are going to be covered with either a copay or coinsurance. And that's all, most dental plans are very similar. So your plans compare, again, pretty much equivalent with everybody else. Vision insurance, about the same. That's generally a cost that is borne completely by the employee, and those plans are all, again, pretty much the same across the board. Vacation was a little bit different. It depends on the classification of the employee as to how those people were treated. I know you're looking at that. So the plan that we compared is your current plan in existence, because there's no guarantee you're going to make any changes. So looking at it as today, the people that have the best plan right now are those classified as administrators, and those are really on par or better than other employers, but your support personnel are a little behind with respect to other employers. And teachers, they're not granted vacation days in addition to scheduled school breaks. What we saw in other districts, some of them do grant additional vacation days and some do not. So it kind of depends on what you want to do with your teachers. It's kind of probably about 30% of the other school districts do grant teachers additional vacation days.
Aren't there 2 personal days, 10 sick days, 2 personal days? It's still, okay.
Are there any other questions of the benefits we've talked about so far?
No, I guess I'm going to go back to this. I appreciate the information on this. I was really looking for something that compared to see what other school districts that we were competing against as far as benefits. That's the comparison I was looking for, and I thought that was what we were kind of talking about. Cause
we did look at...
not rolled in with other stuff. Specifically, because what I'm looking at for what we're doing is we're looking at how to be competitive with other school districts. That's that's what I'm looking for, and I know that's what I thought we were.
There are numbers in the back. This is the general
numbers in the
kind
back
of discussion. Yes, what Ms. Kinzer just showed you.
And let me say this. So when we looked at, and we had some other numbers that were comparing salaries for other districts. And I was looking at for a comparison of benefits with those same districts or similar districts.
Yes. Those are, I have in my bag, now that I think about it, the list of the districts that we pulled.
Okay. If you can send that to us, that would be fine as well. You don't have to hand it to me right now.
The exhibit, the attachment on the handout, the spreadsheet there that has all the data, we do break it out by school systems and
it just says districts as a cumulative, though, not individually.
Right.
Right.
I was looking for something more individual.
Yeah, I guess.
Because again, if we're comparing, we're trying to compete to both retain and bring in employees, and my intention was to look at, are we competitive with our benefits with our competitors? And because that's the same thing we're doing with this actual salary. We've heard that quite a bit, that we're the lowest out of 14 districts. Well, I would like to know where we stand out of those 14 districts in terms of our benefits packages, what they are. That's kind of what I'm looking for, to be able to compare those things.
Okay, so it's kind of difficult to come up with a dollars and cents comparison because the benefits are all different. It's easy to come up with some dollars and cents on employee contributions, but how do you place a value on vacation or sick leave? Those kinds of things is pretty hard to do.
Specifically, I would have looked at just, at least for starting, what we could do, which should be the health insurance ones or any of those other benefits, dental, health insurance, or vision.
Yeah. And the other difficulty, if you pick just a handful of other comparisons, comparator employers, benefits vary quite a bit in terms of plan design, and demographics play a big part in the employer's costs. So our approach has been more to take a a look at a larger set of comparative public
I mean, I can
sector
appreciate
employers.
that, but again, for the purpose of what we're doing, I think it would be more beneficial to have the comparison of benefits. Again, we're trying to put together a compensation
Sure.
package that would include salary and benefits. So that again, that's what I'm looking for.
Let me just clarify and make sure I understand what you're asking. So we're looking we want to see where we stack up as far, as an example, the family benefit, the non-employer part of it. How do we stack up against Williamson County or Marshall County or Giles or whoever others? Do they pay 50%? Do they pay 75%? Do they pay it all? And where do we stack up in that range? So that's one example. And I do know we put a numerical value on vacation days or sick days that roll into person? Yeah, so it does have a numerical value, or I would use that as one anyway. Okay, that's kind of what I was wanting to clarify there.
Well, I can tell you that the comparator group of school districts includes Cheatham, Davidson, Williamson, Rutherford, Murfreesboro City Schools, Marshall County, Coffee, Franklin County, DeKalb, Putnam, Cumberland, and a couple of outer schools that were included in the salary study, Blount, however you say that, Sevier, and Madison County. So we weren't able to get all of the health care premiums for every single one of the 17 that were used in the salary study, but those are the ones we were able to get. And so when I say that 12 of those 16 use the same exact benefits that you do as far as health care, they all use the Tennessee state plans. And so we put all of those numbers together, we average them all together, and we compare you specifically to that group. And so if you look at the very last page of the report that was given you, the one that looks like this, that has those numbers on it. It shows you with employee-only coverage paid at the employee's premium is 0. The average of those 16 school districts is $77.67 for employee coverage. Now, if you look at the notes down below, in the school district group, 25% provide employee-only coverage at no cost in the standard PPO, and 43.8% in the high deductible plan. But to give you additional comparators so that you would have more information rather than less, we also provided information from our survey that we do of employers across the state, which includes 50 public sector employers across the entire state. And that shows $55.95 as the employee-only premium on average, with 36% of those employers providing employee-only coverage at no cost. Now, across the entire United States, that's what the KFF study is. It's a very widely used study that has been in use for many, many years. And they look at benefits across the entire United States. And that one shows the average, and these are all monthly amounts, not per paycheck. So that study shows average employee-only premiums for a PPO plan at $108.25. But if you're looking at just school districts, you've got $77.67. But the reason for providing you additional information more than just school districts is while you're competing with school districts specifically for your teachers, you have a lot of other employees that it would be wise to not discount in looking at your benefit structure as well as your salary structure. And so as compensation professionals, it's our job to make sure that you have the information to look at all of them. And so you'll also see the family coverage below that shows that of all of those segments, your premiums are, I believe I said this earlier, it's between 8 and 32% higher, depending on which, and that 8 and 32% was across all 4 of your plans, not just the one that's on this, as far as the PPO. So does that address your question a little bit better?
You don't have to justify why you did it. I mean, I understand why you gave it what you did. I was still looking for other
information. But this is not, so this isn't, you're wanting it specifically, this county says pays this much,
yes.
And this county pays this much.
Yes.
We could probably provide that. I guess what we were trying to do from our perspective was answer the question, how does your benefits package stack up to other competitive employers, and what implication does that have for how we handle wages and salaries? So the notion being that if your benefits package was vastly superior to those of other employers, we could afford and probably could get by with paying less on the salary side. Conversely, if your benefits package was significantly worse or less generous than the competition, I would argue that we'd probably, if you don't want to change that we would probably spend, to be competitive overall, we'd want to spend more on the dollars on the wage and salary side. So that's the question we were trying to answer, and it's kind of, we anticipated that's what you were trying to answer as well. My guess is, if we look at just the Williamsons and the Rutherfords and the Davidsons, you're going to be worse off than these numbers would predict. So from the taxpayer standpoint, I'm not sure that makes sense. Is that fair that we just pick those? Why don't we pick some of the other districts that we are just as likely to recruit from? And so that's why we kind of chose the approach we took. We could certainly provide you the information for the key players that you're looking at, and my guess is you're going to be right in there or maybe a little bit worse off. Doesn't tell us anything in terms of do we need to change our approach on the wage and salary side.
I think both of those pieces of information would be helpful. What you guys prepared as far as where we stack up against everybody else as collectively, and then I was kind of thinking rather than comparing us to some of the other ones, East Tennessee that you had mentioned, we would look also at just the ring around Murray County, Hickman, Lawrence, Giles, Marshall, and see how we stack it, because that's where we're going to be recruiting folks from. Right. We're not pulling people from Sevier County, but just to see a little bit more localized what's there. I think that maybe is what Mr. Moore's getting at as well.
Okay.
Mr. Hooper.
Just off the top of your head, do you know which were the 4 districts that didn't participate in the Tennessee State Insurance Plan?
Yes. Davidson has their own plan. Williamson has a separate type of plan. Rutherford and Blount.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Ms. Irvin.
I just want to, from the way I reviewed this and interpreted it, it looks like we're actually doing rather well on paying our employees' premiums. It's just where we're maybe at a loss is on the family. Is that correct? Because we're actually ahead of the game on individual coverage, correct? It's the way it appears, we're like $78 better per month.
The other thing I should add, when you're talking about benefits management, there are various cost containment strategies on the healthcare side. I managed benefits for Dollar General Corporation for a few years, so I mostly knew who to call. But anyway, I'm somewhat familiar with it, and we've done a lot of work with a lot of employers in the public sector since then in the course of our work. And we have some clients that their strategy is we do not want the families on our health care plan. So we will price it that way so exorbitantly that no family will pick our plan. We have succeeded in managing our health plan costs. Now, we have probably failed in terms of employee relations and maybe a bit in the recruiting and retention side, but as a cost containment strategy, you can't argue with that. So that's another thing. When you cherry pick certain employers, that's why we like to have a large group of comparative employers to look at, because they all have different cost containment strategies, different demographics, different locations, different plans. The larger, it's kind of the law of large numbers. The more numbers you have, the more data you have, I think the better your conclusions are. I just kind of add that in there. It's kind of tough to compare health plans from employer to employer because of all those different factors.
Okay, thank you.
There's also a move now for some employers, rather than just making the premiums larger, they're putting on a spousal surcharge. Or another option that many employers are starting to take is requiring that you have proof that your spouse is not eligible for other coverage to be eligible for your plan. So with all of those different options out there, it makes it even more difficult to compare.
All right, thank you. What do we want to do with this information now? We've got quite a bit in front of us. I guess do we turn it over to HR for the budget prep? Ms. Kinzer.
I'll make this comment. Every year we talk about, our benefits, we haven't been able to do on salary what we probably needed to do, but we have great benefits. So what's happened, and I think, Ms. Gerards, I'll ask if this is what you all are seeing, is where years ago when we probably had greater benefits in many areas, they've all caught up. They've had to be competitive. And so it's almost looking at this with we're higher here, lower here. It's kind of a wash.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it? And so we can't really look at our benefits and think, but we don't have to worry about salary because our benefits, they're the best. Everybody's offering benefits. Everybody is doing that. So now, I think that's what this is telling us, is that we're competitive, aren't we? But we're competitive on an even slope now.
Yeah, that's the question we were trying to answer for our purposes on the salary side. The scope of the study was not intended to do a real detailed dive into healthcare costs and health plan designs and that kind of thing. That was not what we signed up to do. This is what we've given you is kind of what we agreed to do. It's kind of a top-down overview of benefits that would, just as you described, give us some clue as to how we look at or how do we target the wage and salary market. And I think we've probably accomplished that. Now, we can give you more detail because we do have some more detail from some of the other ones. We can give you that detail. But, that's health plan management, benefits management piece that's not really part of our study. So we can give you that information. You can do what use it as you see fit. That's fine.
Ms. Parker.
I guess for me, in order to know what to do with this, I kind of need to hear from staff on what are our goals for recruitment and retention of our employees, and how does this fit into that? Is it salary? Is it benefits? Is it a combination? How would y'all prioritize this if you were sitting up here?
I think we put all our eggs in the salary basket. And that, again, the will of the board is the will of the board. When I look at this, and in conversations I've had previous to the role I'm in now, as well as the role I'm in now, our benefits are comparable. For employee only, for our young teachers, it's fantastic. It gets their foot in the door. They start to understand what insurance means, and I don't mean that to insult people, but they start to understand what that benefit is. I think we're very comparable. I don't think anybody can look at this and say, oh gosh, in one county you're paying $483 and I'm paying $535. I don't think that's a huge, I don't hear that as a battle cry. I think our battle cry right now is competitive salaries. I think this is a worthy endeavor if you want to go down this path, but it is a path that we need to. It's not a today, if we're going to look at every single district that touches us, we need to have that information. We need to have it now as we're on the precipice of putting a budget together. So that might be a worthy endeavor for our next fiscal year. It may be a worthy, if you want it now, we will see if we can get that information. But the battle cry I hear is competitive wages.
Thank you. That's very helpful, kind of to hear district leadership kind of saying something that definitive. Mr. Howell, I'll get back to you.
So, just looking at page 8, which is the evaluation, and gives you a numerical value. It's out of a 9-point scale, so 9 being the most generous, 1 being the least generous. And I've always heard that we had an amazing set of benefits. Like Ms. Kendra said, I think at one time we were probably the crown jewel. But, was that 10 years ago? Was that 15 years ago? Was that 30 years ago? I don't know. That was, before my time here. I feel like over time we have just said our benefits packet's amazing. So we don't look at it. Why would we look at it? It's amazing. I think just giving the evaluation here on page 8, it shows that we're just average. It's 5.5 out of 9. I mean, that's average. And we're already talking about the lowest evaluation is a 4. That's in vacation. So we're already talking about changing one of those things already that could potentially make that 5.5 a 6. If I was just a new teacher going to apply, getting out of college, going to apply, I could care less what that evaluation is. I mean, I could care less if our benefits package is amazing. I'm looking to get a job because I've got to pay rent. And so I tend to agree that, I think salary is probably the most important, considering that our benefits are just, they're average. They're slightly above average. That's great. But I think I wanted the information. I wanted more information, but just going over the information that we have right here, I don't think we're going to see this as a huge recruiting tool one way or the other unless we're willing to make drastic changes. And I don't think that we're willing to make drastic changes because we don't really have all the data to do that at this point. Yeah. So I agree with Ms. Ventura that perhaps the most beneficial thing we can do is focus on our salaries at this time.
Thank you. I would definitely tend to agree with that. And if I'm not mistaken, we have seen a chart that lists the starting salaries for counties right around us. We received that in one of our attachments about a year ago, I think. I'd be interested to dig that back up and find it. Ms. Parker. I know, let me give her credit.
The only other thing I would say, though, is, I hear what everyone's saying, and I hear what you're saying as far as salary, but when you are putting together a budget, obviously this all factors into it. I guess what I want to know is if we are falling behind in areas, I do think that we potentially need to look at tackling some of that potentially in this budget. But also, I think we have areas where, I'll just be honest, I think we pay retirees that have worked here for a certain period of time. We pay their retirement, their health insurance until they hit Medicare. And that's a huge benefit. But if we're not recruiting teachers, and that's not a selling point for them, then do we really need to have that benefit? Because I'll be honest with you, I would much rather pay for my child's teacher's health care right now than pay for my husband's teacher's health care. I just think that that's what we've got to focus on is our students right now and the benefits that we can offer to attract teachers for them. Now, if I'm not saying to do away with, before everybody gets all into a tizzy about that, I'm not saying to do away with it, but I'm saying if that's not a recruiting tool that we're using in HR or with our principals, then we really need to evaluate how much money we're spending on that. And until we know the cost of some of these things, we really can't evaluate whether or not it's worth it for us to use those things. So some of those things I would like to see when we get into budget as far as what it actually costs.
Thank you, Ms. Kinzer.
I just have a question. I'm sorry, I didn't see his light. But then my light should always be before his anyway. But
it is.
It shines brighter, right? The turn 60, you can retire. I understand all the 30 years of 60 and everything. But didn't the state pay a portion of that insurance?
I think that's all on us.
You think it's all on us, or the state doesn't pick up some of that?
No, I believe it's all on us. So we pay for it. I will say, while it's while there's two different things we're looking at. You're recruiting employees who are new, and we're retaining employees who've been here. I know we have kept some employees here because of that retiree benefit. And those are your teachers who have been here a long time, who they have proven themselves in the classroom. I mean, every single teacher is needed and wanted in Maury County Public Schools. So there is a difference in when we're looking at how we need to get a teacher, a first-year teacher, and how we need to keep a 20-year teacher, and how we can go about that and do those things. And I'll say, overall, as Ms. Ventura has already said, we have to do something on our salary in general. HR is continually taking resignations and retirements. This week, I took retirements for math and English at 2 of the schools who've already not been able to fill those this year. So now we're having, I already have these happening today. I've heard of people who are looking at other counties. Like, our staff needs something from this board saying, we're going to do something for you to keep you here. Like, I just want to really express that, because we continue to take resignations and retirements. And I don't want to get here in July and go, how are we going to teach our students? Because we have taken so many resignations from teachers, from bookkeepers, from secretaries, from EAs. It's across the board that we're taking them. And in order to, and the retention part of it is huge. I kind of jokingly to my staff goes, could you imagine what our HR staff could do if we actually kept employees from July to May, and we weren't continually having to employ new people and process resignations and new hire paperwork? We processed 30 people this last month for insurance benefits. So it's 30 people that we added to the district, but they were added because somebody else left. And also in, like, Central High School, bless them, they have had so many people accept the job, and literally the day before they go, I'm going somewhere else for a better salary. So then we start back at square one. So that's been some of our problems with filling our jobs now. I know that, I'm sorry, I'm just very passionate about this, because our staff need a win. And I'm just tired of taking these resignations because we can't pay them. I attached for you guys, I asked our principals. That was our principal survey. I had 16 out of our 22 principals respond to it. They did it anonymously as to what can help keep our staff here. Overall, all of them said salary, and all of them are looking to keep and retain people at all different levels, because you need different levels of teachers. You need first-year teachers. You need teachers who are in their 25th year of employment. You need staff who can bring it. We have got to do something. And when, like, our maintenance people, our technology people, those people who can go anywhere and walk out, we've got to have competitive salaries. We lost a really great employee because they found a better salary somewhere else. That's just across the board. And so, I just think, I know myself and the rest of the staff that's sitting on this front row, we need better salaries for our staff. We do have some numbers. Doug and I worked on those. He has those for you, some preliminary numbers of what the salary study itself would cost. He can speak to that because he has those on his paper down there. But I just want to be resounding that we need to do something for our staff. We are losing them. I have been hearing rumors of people going to other counties' job fairs that have been happening the last 2 weekends. And we've just got to do something. And I think if staff can know from this meeting that, yes, we're going to do something, I'm afraid if we walk away from this meeting, and I know we can't vote on anything at this meeting as it's a work session, but I'm afraid if we walk away, what I'm going to end up walking into this next week, and if we see a lot more resignations and retirements, because some people actually might stay. They may be, I'm about to retire, but this could help my retirement more, because it goes into how that retirement is processed. It goes into that top 5 years for them. So they go, wow, I'm going to get a big increase, so maybe I'll continue to stay and work longer for Maury County because they value me as an employee. So I'll step down from my soapbox, but I feel like as your HR person, that's what you employ me to do, and I'm speaking on behalf of every single employee that we have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moore.
Oh, there's a couple things here. I think some of you guys are making some assumptions about what I'm looking for here. I mean, it's not that I'm trying to squeeze it down. I'll be honest. One of the other concerns I've had from other employees was our family coverage and what we pay on that. And my problem has always been that we've never taken, as a district, a comprehensive look at what we offer and how we compensate our employees totally. And I'm sorry, I think we are setting ourselves up for failure if we think we just pass some kind of salary increase across the board and that's magically going to fix this. I can tell you right now, I've looked at other districts that have just done some very large raises north of us, and they're saying they're still running into the same problems. So this is not a magic bullet, and that's one of the reasons I want us to look at these things, because, you know, like I said, look at the family coverage on the insurance. I think that, you know, some people said that's not a big deal at rent. Well, if you pay an extra $100 a month on your family coverage, that's $1,200 a year you're not paying for rent, that you don't have to pay for that. So it is a dollar difference at the end of the day from your paycheck. But those are the kind of benefits I would like to know, and I wish we as a district would look at all of these things to go with what Ms. Parker said as well, some of these other benefits. We need to be looking at those things and put together who do we want to attract and how do we want to attract them, because that's going to, you know, the family coverage is going to attract someone different than just a pay increase for your level 1 through 3, possibly. It may be some overlap there. But it depends on what you're wanting to bring in. And I would love for us as a district to look at all of these things and decide maybe we need to do some additional help on the family coverage. Maybe the dollar impact is not as big as some others, but from a relationship to our employees, there would be a segment of our employees that would get a huge benefit out of that. And they would want to stay. But we've never really looked at that. And again, this is where I'm scared. I appreciate, Ms. Ventura, that you said we had all our eggs in one basket. It just makes me very nervous, because it is just trying something. And don't get me wrong, I know everybody's going to appreciate it, but I don't think it's going to magically solve the problem. And I think we're still going to have to look at these things, and until we do, we're just throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks.
And I absolutely agree with you, and think, like I said, this is a worthy endeavor. I'm not saying that this is not. And when your premium goes down, that is more money in your pocket. That is more money in your paycheck. It doesn't increase your base salary, but it feels good when you see that on the bottom line. I just don't think we have the information tonight to look at our surrounding districts. So if that's an endeavor that you want to take on, we absolutely can do that. I don't know the timeliness of that for our budget impact. And that's your decision to make.
To go with it, I would just say that I have been literally asking for that every year since I've been on this board.
And I will say,
it's not a new request.
When I first came to Murray County, my first job was to try to recruit some special ed teachers from Marshall County. And most of my friends, unlike myself, have children. And when they saw the family coverage, it is, it's palpable to them. So again, worthy endeavor. Tell us the will of the board, and we'll see what we can put together.
So in this attachment, we have the spreadsheet that shows the teacher salary increase costs. Doug, is that prepared by you? So what we... No.
So the study, the group Thompson and Burris have calculated the salary increase. I've applied our also additional cost and benefits that we would have to provide. So your Social Security, Medicare, and TCRS costs from the employer. So I've got the total cost for every single type of pay study that has been proposed. Yeah.
Okay. So at these different levels, that's showing what it's out the door pretty much going to cost us. And this is for teachers only. This is not for any kind of support staff or...
I have all of the other ones too.
You do?
Yeah.
But this is just for teachers?
This multicolored document with 50th percentile, 60th percentile, 75th percentile, and 100th percentile, yes, that's just teachers.
Okay. So I don't know which one of these, which one of Jennifer or Doug, which one of you to bounce off of, but I would like to see what that actually looks like. I know it's going to be really hard, but like per employee, because if that's only like say $1,000 a year, is that? I mean, I'm just trying to get at my idea around what we're offering. You see what I'm saying? If it's $1,000 a year, if it's $5,000 a year, I don't know by looking at this. So.
Right, but I'll just say that's going to be very difficult to calculate because we're based on steps. Because our current step schedule for the teachers, there's no rhyme or reason as to the percentages and the differences. Some don't even have steps that actually go up anymore, as well as your classified staff. Like, it's completely, I'll tell you this much though, for your classified staff, it is going to have a tremendous impact on the majority of them. So to know exactly, you know, how much this is going to bring, like, per employee, like, you'd get a really weird estimate, because some people are going to see, and in the original packet that was attached at the last work session, and it has that breakdown as to where a teacher's at in a step. So some staff would see a little bit more increase than others because of where they're at in the step level and how our percentages has gone, and it's not equal distances now. So I'm not exactly sure how you're going to view that and see that. By all means, Mr. Lakonen.
You can turn mine off.
All right. I got it. So, there is a sheet. I don't know if this sheet is on there, it on the agenda. It should say the difference between schedules. It shows our old teacher schedule, the proposed, depending on what sheet you're on, and then it says the difference. So, for example, you can see what the difference would be for a teacher at every single step on that schedule. So, just starting with the lowest first, you can look at a step 0 teacher with a bachelor's degree. If we take the 50th percentile, basically putting us in the middle of the pack of the districts that were studied, that would be a $2,081 increase to that starting new teacher with no experience at a bachelor's degree level. You can carry that through all the degrees and see what that salary change is based on the education level and also their years of service as a teacher. And so that would be the least expensive option. They also have step 0 at 100th percentile, and that would change that first year teacher that has a bachelor's degree on the very first step. That would increase at $7,425. So a very big span. It just depends on which one you pick, but you can see what the pay change would be on each one of those schedules.
Thank you very much. We are kind of getting to the point where we're almost talking around in circles. So let's keep going, but let's also. I guess what I'm saying, that didn't sound right when it came out.
No, it didn't.
I guess what I'm saying is we're not going to answer these questions tonight.
I want to make a proposition here, and I want to know what would keep us from going on and implementing this now. If I personally like the blue, okay, because the 25 years would be in there. That means that every employee for the next 5 years would be getting a step raise. When over 300 of them have not gotten any in years. We have money in fund balance that we were not allowed because of maintenance of effort. Knowing we were going to get that money from sales tax and all the revenues we were going to get, so we didn't have that money to help our employees out because it was going to go in fund balance, and that's where it is. And that's where it'll probably be next year, and that's where the commission can look at it and say, gosh, y'all got a lot of money. Don't ask us for any money. So what I propose is that we do this now, that we look at this, get a price on this. Doug has priced it out, or is going to, in the thing we got from our interim superintendent, that the 24th it will be priced out. And I would say we'd make it as soon as possible retroactive, and then it's in the budget. Done. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I'm not in charge, but...
Okay. In talking to Doug with the numbers, making it retroactive would be nearly impossible. However, I think we can find middle ground at the 75th percentile to end this year. So, Doug, stop me if I'm wrong, but we could do that the first pay in June. Good faith effort, we're at the 75th percentile. Then I think Doug is prepared to work with me to give me the 100th percentile in the budget and the 75th percentile in the budget, and hopefully we can land somewhere in the middle for fiscal year '23.
Which means we would utilize funds that we have in fund balance or not unused funds, which we're bound to have a ton of,
Correct.
for a June paycheck.
Based on preliminary numbers, Doug is telling me we have 2 years in fund balance right now. So this is sustainable at the 75th percentile, but I really want to look at the 100th. I'd like to be number one for maybe a minute.
If we were to
Because
make,
you know everybody's
if
trying
we
to
make
catch
this
up.
commitment
That's right.
right away, wouldn't that help you?
And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, salary study people who know more than I do, the salary study includes 25 steps for, so every year there will be an increase.
Thank you. Ms. Parker?
I was just curious, I think this company, y'all also did a salary study for the county, right? What percentile is the county shooting for to put their employees in?
Their study was completely different.
Okay.
So we didn't do percentiles. They did a market average for all of the positions, and they tried to align us with the market. So some positions are at basically, here's the market average. This position is 10% below that, but it's within 10%, that's okay. Or this position's 10% above that, that's okay. Just trying to keep it around the market average. It was a completely different study with no steps, just grade-based.
Do you know what the cost of it is, though?
Yeah,
To implement?
$2.7 million.
2.7.
Yeah.
So
Actually, sorry,
Okay.
it's actually 2.5. 2.7 was the higher one that they didn't. 2.5 million is the cost for that, including benefits.
Okay. So, and I'm just looking at, because I think we all have a bunch of different documents pulled up. So just so y'all know what I'm looking at the file that says MCPS teacher salary increase cost. And when I look at the 75th percentile that Ms. Ventura just mentioned, it's 2.4 to 3.1, depending on the steps. And I know that doesn't include the benefits. I'm with you on that. But I do think that's in the range of what you're talking about, what the county is looking at for their own employees. So I think that to me is kind of my baseline where I would want to start when we look at salaries. I'm not interested in the 50th or anything less than the 75th. The other thing I will say is doing something for our teachers right now. Like you said, we have a lot of unused funds from not having teachers this year. Personally, for me, what I would like to see, I'd like to see bonus payments for the teachers that we have that are committed to coming back next year. If we could have people sign contracts that they're ready to sign, not in September when we do it normally, because that's too late. I would like people to know that we're making a good faith effort for these numbers, and then try to recruit and give bonus payments this year to try to retain the teachers that we already have. And I would be interested in staff looking at that the unused teacher line item numbers to try to come up with what would be a reasonable bonus payment if we were to try to get contracts out. I would hope in April, maybe May, at the very latest.
I have looked at some of the numbers, not all of the numbers, but I have looked at some of the numbers. Two concerns I have with a bonus payment. Number one, if we gave a bonus payment to everyone, once again, we're not making a commitment. And I know that's not exactly what you're saying. So step one is, it doesn't look like we're committed for a sustainable raise for our employees when we take the easy way out and just divide and conquer. And again, I'm not saying that that's not everybody appreciates a little bit of cash in their pocket, but it does not look like we are making a sustained effort, in my humble opinion. Second thing, if we give bonuses to people who are willing to sign contracts for next year and they disappear, are we going to try to retrieve that bonus? What kind of processes would be in place for, you signed on the dotted line, we gave you $2,500, and I'm just making that number up, and your husband got transferred to Tijuana?
I guess we need to look to Mr. Wilbur on that one.
for anybody watching at home, we will go to the ends of the earth to collect those funds. It is very difficult to collect in those circumstances, but we do make an effort. You have made an effort in the past, varying degrees of success.
Well, and let me just say, I understand what you're saying as far as the commitment. I'm not saying do one and not do the other. I'm saying to try to do both simultaneously. And part of my concern is what you're talking about with paying in the 75th percentile in June, which is what I think you mentioned. How do we know those people don't move to Tijuana in July? So I don't see what the big difference is. I'd rather just have a signed document and have teachers committed to teaching our students, and have principals be able to plan so that they know I'm going to have an English teacher for this grade at Central, or I better pound the pavement and go and find somebody. I don't think that in the past, at least particularly this last year, I think we've really struggled with trying to fill holes that have been gaping holes for a long time. And I think part of it is I think we've gotten started too late in some of those instances. I mean, if you're starting to recruit people in July for a position, I mean, if somebody else got them committed in April or May, your pool's already shrunk. I'm just trying to figure out what our pool is to figure out what we need. That's my only argument.
Thank you very much. I do think that a lot of the questions that we have are going to be cleared up once we are able to start presenting budgets that include this information in it. You and I need to set a date before we leave tonight to start working on that. So I think some of that will give us at least something to start forming towards our goal. Mr. Howe.
Mr. Laconin, how many people do we employ?
Approximately 1,800, but it goes up, down,
fluctuates.
Sideways. Right now, we're probably around 1,700.
How many does the county employ?
That also depends and fluctuates, but if you want to just talk full-time employees, you can guesstimate around 520.
So 520, okay.
Yeah.
Are those positions, do they have to have a degree of any kind? As a general rule?
A lot of them have to have degrees and certifications, but there are some that don't.
Okay. I guess my point is, and not to take away, but I don't think comparing the $2.4 million for the county's or $5 million for the county's budget to an increase of our budget is really fair and accurate. Our teachers have, at minimum, a bachelor's. Many of them have masters, and some of them have doctorates. And that's just the degrees, not including any certifications they may have obtained along the way for various. I mean, it's a rabbit hole as far as Tennessee Department of Education and certifications. So, I mean, to me, looking at, if we're seriously committed to this, I like the 75th percentile. I would love the 100th percentile even more. But I just, and it's all dependent upon funding. But the other thing that comes to mind is we're comparing ourselves to schools and school systems. Unfortunately, we're not in competition for employees with just schools and school systems. We are in competition for every job available out there right now. And when our just EAs, for instance, they can literally go to McDonald's and get a $3,000 sign-on bonus and make more money hourly. That's really, they've got to be really committed to what they're doing in Maury County. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at budgeting and we're looking at percentiles and everything. Just keep that in mind that it's more than just 14 different districts that we're comparing ourselves to. We're comparing ourselves to the entire Middle Tennessee job market. And that may be another school system, that may be another company. So it's not just about, in my mind, dollars or cents. It's about trying to attract and retain good employees who are going to take care of our system and take care of our students. And I say system because I'm not just talking about teachers. I like that we are in a climate-controlled environment that has flushable toilets, and I want to make sure that every single person is taken care of. whether it's our EAs or our maintenance people. It's very important that all of them are taken care of. I know we're focusing on teachers, but it's very important that our buildings function, because we could pay the best salary in the world for the best teachers. We don't have air conditioning. I guarantee you we'll lose a lot of teachers real quick. So just make sure that we're looking at this in a holistic fashion for the entire district.
Thank you. Let me just ask very quickly, and I'll get to you here. You had mentioned that when we could bump up to the 75th percentile. Did you say June or July?
Two things. June, and that was a deadline that Mr. Lukonen gave me. I would like to do it earlier. But I do understand changing the pay. And to just for a minute to briefly talk about what Mr. Howell just said, we are, this table in front of you, this is an all boats will rise, and I think it's important for you to realize that I want the 75th percentile, and again, you all have to vote on this, I'm not, but my recommendation is the 75th percentile across all categories, and Doug does have those numbers for you all to look at.
Okay, and we'll get into that with the budget presentations, but I guess the reason I asked that is to go back to what Ms. Parker said. If they start receiving that increase, that's going to be a pretty substantial increase. That almost serves as a bonus at that point, and that could come out. That's exactly right. Am I reading this wrong, or is that?
No, it would be for this year's current employees.
Exactly.
Because they get paid through July 30th, so it would be 4 full pays at their new level.
I'd like to see a cost comparison on that.
Okay.
Okay,
Mr.
Hooper.
So something that I guess maybe words of caution in this respect. I don't see us being able to keep up with an open market. I don't think we should even try. We'll lose every time. We cannot pay more than McDonald's can pay at any point. If we raise up to them, they can beat us with no effort. So when we're looking at salaries, we need to compare to other government agencies. It's the only thing that makes sense. Otherwise, we're putting on a massive cost to what would be taxpayers, and they're not going to want to pay it, I could promise you, because people aren't going to be able to pay what corporations can pay. It's just, to me, it seems unfair to everyone at that point, because it's a promise that can't be kept. Government will not be able to pay what the open market can pay, and they shouldn't be able to.
Oh, yeah. Can I help us wrap this up? I'll try. If I can understand correctly, where we're at is that the superintendent is going to start incorporating the 75th, and the 100 percentile numbers, including full payroll information for the budget talks, correct? Is that where we're at? The other thing was what we could do possibly in this fiscal year. I would like some information brought back to the next work session for us to be able to do something either May or June that includes the dollar amount we have available out of the teacher line item that would be theoretically unspent. Does that make sense, Doug? Where we're short, because we haven't been fully staffed. See, you're supposed to bring that to the next meeting. The next meeting. I'm ready for us to discuss it. But I would like to, along with what Ms. Parker said, I would like to discuss some other ways of possibly doing this. I know some people don't like it, and while you say it seems like it's a bit of a bonus, the fact is the person that's still getting a last paycheck, even though they've decided they're already gone out and headed somewhere else, they're still getting a paycheck too. And I think where Ms. Parker was going with that is just we'd like to have some commitment from some people that they're going to be here next year and next year for the kids. Because remember, this isn't just about employees, this is also about the kids and the education. And I don't think that's an unreasonable give and take. And you're right, it's not an either or. I think in the past we've kind of gone the bonus route when we couldn't do other things. I don't think that's what this board is looking at right now. But I think these two things together are not unreasonable. And I think the professionals in our organization here are going to look at that and go, okay, that's a reasonable thing to ask for. And more importantly, I think what Ms. Parker was asking for is that we start shifting how we commit people for positions earlier in the year. I've heard several people, principals and others, say that they would love to be able to start doing that earlier in the year so that we can have some people and make some plans that are a little more solid. And then when they have holes to fill, they have more time to try to fill them. And it's not last minute, and it's not after school's already started, which we've done plenty of. So I would like to see if we could have that dollar figure that Doug already gave us, give it to us again next time, but with maybe staff can bring us some other ideas, other than just one you brought, possibly some other ways that we could incentivize people to stick around for the next school year and maybe beyond. I don't know how that looks, but I'd be willing to look at other options that go with spending that money in those regards.
Absolutely, and that helps us to know that we're not talking exclusive of each other. So we can look at, to Mr. Hooper's point, I don't think we're going to compete with the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, the Lowe's, which unfortunately it's just our reality right now. But we can certainly put together some type of package that entices you to not only want to work for us next year, but sustained employment.
Mr. Fulbright.
Yes.
I would be remiss, because I have 401 classified folks, to specifically say we get caught, and I am a teacher, remember that. Teachers, we talk about them a lot. If you go into our pay scales and you look at our classified folks, it is embarrassing what we pay for them. I would be remiss to not speak specifically on their point. To Mr. Hooper's point, we lost a tech this last week to the city of Columbia. She went about 4 blocks for about $20,000 more and a whole lot less responsibility. That's not a corporation that can just pull into the pockets. That is a local government entity that we compete with daily, and that has to be noted, not just on the teacher side, but on that classified side as well.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ard, do you have any?
Just one, I guess 2 last things. One, I hear you, Ms. Parker, and I'm glad to know that's not, you guys aren't talking about doing one and not the other. And we had actually talked about a potential signing bonus and getting some of those teachers on board. That was things that we have already talked about in executives, just so you guys know we have been thinking about those things. To Mr. Moore's point, I just wanted to clarify with Doug, if we didn't bring, we're March 15th, so if we didn't bring something back till the April work session, what is the real likelihood of getting any of that actually in place between my staff and his staff before the end of the year? I mean, I hear what you're saying about talking about it later, but I also know it's March 15th, and I just don't want to keep. And we talked about this a month ago. Here we are, another month later. I just want to know realistically what the finance team can actually do if we don't do something about it at the next meeting.
Mr. Moore.
I mean, we would need some information to be able to do that, to be able to come up with some plan. We can call a meeting anytime we need to call a meeting. If we need to have something, if you guys can get some information to us and we can flesh that out, we can call a special call meeting anytime, and we can coordinate that with when the county commission would have to approve any funds that we have to approve if we need to, which we wouldn't have to if it stays in that line item, correct? Okay. So, again, we can have meetings whenever we need to. I know in the last few years we've been a little reluctant to call special call meetings, but we've done plenty of them in the past. So.
Well, and we're going to need to plan our budget meetings coming up that we can talk about some budget type issues. We can connect those 2 pieces if we need to down the road. So I think we all kind of know which direction we're headed. Yes, Mr. Laconin.
I've got the cost of the report for teachers, classified staff, benefits, all wrapped together, including food service, at the 75th percentile for tonight. I understand we want more information, but just to let you all know of that cost, it is $6 million, $6,269,517. I have costs for all the other percentiles if you are interested in those. The dates for the school board approving a budget to send to the commission by private act is May 1st of 2022. So this school board has to approve a whole budget, including payroll, by that time, in addition to getting a capital plan approved and sent to the Financial Management Board in the month of April as well. At this point in time, as Michael has stated, we don't have a budget calendar, but we know that we can set meetings as needed. But if there are questions about anything and the cost of anything on the study tonight, I can do that. And I could probably come up with a cost of a bonus as well, if that's what we're looking for. But I know that we as a staff, with guidance from the superintendent, we're ready to kinda push something out and have guidance to bring you a budget, the first week of April to go ahead and get moving on that. But if we don't have direction on what to pay people, I can't finish our payroll budget, and that's 90% of our payroll budget. I have our base numbers, what we have with our pay scales now, but my hope is that I'd have direction or some sort of direction from tonight's work session. And it's okay that we don't. We'll meet and do what we need to do.
We're getting there. Ms. Kinzer.
You know, you've heard me in the years I've been on the board saying I never have understood why the very last thing we talk about in budget, on the last day, the day before it has to go to the commission, is salary. Well, this year we need to start with that number. That $6,269,517. That is the starting place. That's in our budget. We need to commit to that. That's what the commission's done. They've committed to those salaries prior to having their entire budget approved. Can't we do that? Yep. Huh? Well, I'm telling.
All right, Ms. Urban.
Well, like Ms. Kinzer, we cannot afford to not. I mean, this with inflation, cost of living, gas, everything. I mean, we have to do something. And I personally, I'm good with the 75%. So I mean, I'd be fine putting it on consent, but that's just my one opinion. But like I say, we can't gamble with this anymore. We have to get it in line, or we're not going to be able to staff schools, is my fear. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sim.
Doug, what kind of numbers did we move into fund balance last year, and what kind of numbers were we looking at moving into fund balance this year?
Last year, you remember, we did not need a tax anticipation note, which was awesome. We didn't have to borrow money from the county to make payroll. We are $10 million ahead of last year at this point in time. We are at our highest fund balance that I've seen since managing the district. At one point in October of 2018, we were right around $3 million. That was our low point. We have to always watch that low point, but right now we're at $38 million in fund balance. The next 6 months are going to be a lot of cost and very little revenue, but right now we're still projected to have a surplus, and we're going to be fine to do this study if we wanted to as a board.
Okay. One last thing, and do we remember we're going to be bringing on a new school? What additional? How much is it additional cost of when we bring on a new school? Roughly $1 million.
Oh no, it's going to be. It depends on how many students come into that school, on what we have to staff for it. So if you partially staffed it, you'd be looking at it at a minimum of about $2 to $3 million a year. If it's got to be fully staffed, say 2,000 students going to that school, you're looking at close to $5 million a year, and that's just in staff. That doesn't include electricity, water, gas, all that.
Okay, but you feel comfortable in sustaining this number, that we'll be okay in providing this $6.3 million yearly?
I am rare form, but yeah, I am comfortable with doing that. And additionally, you know, we have been sent, and I'm not banking on this. The state has sent out guidance for talking about the funding formula that is to replace BEP, and it would increase our operational funding aside from the grants that are included, $15 million a year in operating revenue. So that is not expected to go in this upcoming budget, but the budget after that, and is pending state approval. So we're really hoping to get that approved through the state. Me as a finance director, seeing Murray County get more state funds, and also the county commission being sunsetted on that and having multiple years to prepare, 4 years to prepare for it. I think it's going to be something really good for Murray County, and I really hope they approve it, because it'll make this even more sustainable, and we'll be able to do more operationally going forward.
Okay. Doug, the 75% number, the $6.2 million, that was inclusive of all employees, correct?
Yes, sir. That's teachers and non-teachers. Yes.
Okay. And what was the 100 percentile number?
That's a big one. So just for teachers, that is 8,100,000.
No, not just teachers. I want to know
the whole
budget
enchilada.
impact. Yes,
let me see.
Unless you figure out a way to just talk about teachers in the budget.
It would be 13,233,000. That includes benefits.
Okay. So, just, you asked for clarification. I mean, it was my understanding what we just talked about with the superintendent was that she would be able to start preparing budgets based on those two options. Can you prepare based on those two, or do we need to narrow it down to one?
I can prepare based on those two, but to do something by June and also prepare based on those two going forward, it would just be good it would save a lot of time to get this thing rolling in June, because also employees won't have to wait until September when the budget passes the state to get this money. If we started in June, we'll be on a continuation budget and we can continue to pay those employees the new rate that's been decided on by the board. We wouldn't have to do a retro pay. They wouldn't, have another school district raise their pay before we can even pay our pay, lose them,
Well, I guess I'm still separating these into two different things. I thought we were still talking about the next year's budget. For that, I would think that we've given you guys enough direction to give us those two options, and we work backwards from there.
Okay.
As far as anything for this fiscal year, I don't know what the rest of the board, I thought we were going to bring some more and have some additional meetings on what other options there would be.
Okay.
Because I'll be honest, I haven't thought too much about some of these options until tonight. They were brought up as far as a bonus or some other kind of signing bonus. That's kind of a new thought for me. As is, starting this in June, that really wasn't on my radar that was what we were looking to do.
As a board, would you like to see both just in our budget documents?
I think, yes.
I see. All right. Sounds good.
Do we need to set a special called meeting to take action on this?
It depends on the will right now. If we are looking at implementing the 75th percentile as immediately as our finance department can do it, which would be the June payroll, yes, a special called meeting, we could have all the information there, and we could then take a vote, and they could move forward. And then just know that in your budget, the minimum would be the 75th percentile. And if that means we have to make cuts, I think that means we have to make cuts, and I'm perfectly prepared to do that. But we'll also have the 100th percentile option. It depends on how you want that viewed. If we wait until budget time, I'm afraid we're not going to look like we're making a good faith effort for our employees.
I guess what I'm thinking is we have a meeting scheduled April 5th. Do we need to get together before then and take action?
I think yes.
Okay. Board. I was gonna say we are kind of running out of weeks. You and I need to get our calendars together for other stuff anyway. We'll. I think that tentatively would be a good option. Tuesday of next week, tentatively. Agreeable. Mr. Howe.
So, Mr. Sims, you brought up a good point. A couple of years we were bringing on a lot of new school. We haven't determined what's going to happen with the Spring Hill High School. We may have it open as well. So, if we can't find teachers now with what we're doing, how are you going to completely open up a whole new school and have teachers and staff and bookkeepers and technicians to take care of things? I mean, this is where we're at. And I agree that we should be, and maybe it's just for that one day that we are in the 100th percentile and we pay better than anybody else. But I think we should at least try it. What do we have? I mean, what do we have to lose? I don't know. Maybe happy employees? I don't think we're going to lose happy employees.
All right, thank you. Then we'll get together. We'll put this on a special called meeting next Tuesday evening at 6, and we'll make some headway with it then. Is that agreeable to the board? I'm seeing a lot of faces looking down. Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you for that discussion. I think that does give staff and myself a good direction on where to go. I will say it was very thorough. And I do appreciate y'all coming down to be with us this evening to help answer some of the questions we have. Our vacation holiday policy, Mr. Ard, that was the one that was rolled to next month?
Yes, the board member who asked us to be gone over is not here, and he called me before and asked if it could be moved to the next work session. I would ask, though, that you please do look at it. There are some changes. Staff will still also be looking at it, so what gets put on the next work session may not look exactly like this, but it is different. It's not just changing a few things. So please do look at it. That's all I gotta say, and it'll be on the next work session.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Laconin.
There are many budget amendments on the agenda tonight. I'm happy to go through them all in detail. Key budget amendments. I guess I'll just open it up for questions. I'm happy to pull any of these off. I've reviewed them with the superintendent at our executive meeting, and happy to answer any questions about them.
Any specific budget amendments that you had questions about? Ms. Parker.
And this one is actually not a question for you, Doug, but it's a question for Mr. Williver. On the TCRS payment for we're having to catch up for the oops before Doug was here and taking care of us. Do we have any recourse with just how poorly that was all handled?
I'd have to get a little more specific information from you. If you're talking about VACO and I mean,
just not paying.
I mean, potentially, if there was negligence there, we could look into that. I've seen the number before, but I don't know exactly what all goes into it, so I'd have to do a little research there to give you a better idea of what your odds would be.
Okay. Because I mean, we're paying almost $200,000 out of fund balance because of a big mistake that was made in 2016. So, I personally would think that would be money that could potentially be well spent on our part. And I don't even remember how much we paid VACO, but I'm pretty sure Doug knows. But it was a lot of money.
So again, is it the will of the board that we investigate that and get with Jake, or?
I would say yes.
Just caution that some of those funds you may have saved at the time to now be reinvesting. So some of those funds may have gone into fund balance back then because they weren't properly expended to now expend again. So while the number is a lot, I just want to caution you, it may not turn out to be that much when you actually look at what wasn't funded at the time that went somewhere else.
Okay. I think it'd still be nice to know that. Mr. Laconin.
So that was actually, if I remember correctly, just before VACO was here. November 2016 was.
Yes, that was an MCPS employee.
Yeah.
Error.
Yeah.
It's not VACO.
So yeah, because the finance director walked out December 8th of 2016, so this payroll was under that person.
Okay, so I think that changes maybe the direction we look at with that. All right, is there an agreement for these to go to consent? All right, all these are going to the consent agenda. Monthly financials, Mr. Laconin.
We've received all of our property tax for the most part. I expect to receive maybe 2 to 3% more. We have exceeded projections by 5% on that metric. Sales tax is on track for almost $25 million, which is well ahead of our $16.8 million budgeted. We received $500,000 more in the month of January compared to last year, just on sales tax alone. Our fund balance, if you take a look at our fund balance and cash board on the agenda, it's kind of a neat little seasonal way to look at your fund balance and see it bounce up and down as it goes through the months. So this is the highest it will be. We'll kind of plateau here at $38.9 million. for the next couple of months and then dive off in the month of May, June, July, up until August, mainly because property taxes will be coming in at hardly a trickle, finishing up this fiscal year. Also, our cash balance in that same metric is running at $39.9 million. So that's kind of what our cash is looking like at this point in time. This is the rosiest it'll look, but we are $10 million ahead of last year at this point in time in our fund balance.
Thank you very much. Let me rain on that parade. What was and you'll have to remind me of the number, the deficit that we were not able to put in our budget because of the commission request?
That was just above $8 million. We were going to budget $24 million for sales tax. We budgeted 16.8, so sorry, it's right, $7.2 million, yeah.
So technically, we're only ahead about
$1
or $2 million from what we said we needed.
Well, no, this is fund balance, so this is actual. So this is revenue versus expenditures, not budgetary. So
yeah, I'm just thinking about that deficit number though that we did last year.
It wouldn't have an impact on the fund balance because fund balance is only impacted by actuals. But what it does do is it cripples your ability to budget for operations as you go throughout the year because
that's what I'm getting
you're
at.
Under budgeting your sales tax artificially just to hold maintenance of effort.
That's exactly what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So you could have used it in your operational funds, not take as much out of fund balance as you go throughout the year and just have it budgeted and use it, not have as many budget amendments.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Instruction.
Good evening. We just finished our third assessment using CASE, and on March 14th, teachers were busy looking at that data in the hopes of not in the hopes, but looking at where kids were so they can plan for instruction to get to the 10-ready assessment. I will send you some activities that our fine arts coordinator had sent out about things that are happening in fine arts, and we'll follow up with that and send that to you so that you can see the great things that are happening in fine arts. With that, we'll go forward with the items on the agenda.
Okay. The Memorandum of Understanding. That's next.
So this is an agreement with us and the Fine Arts Committee presented you a fine arts strategy last meeting, and this is part of that Mr. Hollins-Opus is going to help us with that data analysis. So this is an agreement for us that we provide data to them to help us do that planning. There are no funds involved. It's just an MOU. Yeah.
We'll move that to consent. When you said no funds, that always makes people smile. All right, next up, instructional low bids.
So the next one does involve some funds. We have different items on there. The one that's actually that you're gonna that we want you to move to consent if you approve is the one that's dated March 14th. We wanted to leave those on there so you could see. We originally had one dated the 4th, where we thought this is what we had in terms of what we would need for Elevate teachers the last 9 weeks, and that changed rapidly over the course of a week. We had some resignations, as Ms. Gerard said, and so we're trying to make sure that we cover all of those staff vacancies with content instruction through Elevate. So if you look, is in the budget amendments that you just moved to consent, one of those is to put enough money in from the teacher line to $399 to be able to cover any increases that we may have with Elevate, so that we can make sure that we are on time and getting those instructors in place and getting ready to go for the 4 9 weeks.
Ms. Parker.
So as I understand it, the ones that we just moved to consent, that budget amendment 11-112, it said 120,000, and then in that one that you just referenced, I think it's 124,000. So do those need to align, or do we have enough to cover?
There's currently $40,000 still in that line item.
Still 40,000 still in it? Okay. The other thing I will say is, when we're kind of going back to our salary study, I think that this right here illustrates why we have to do what we were talking about doing for an hour. I mean, this in and of itself, I don't think it's, I'm not going to speak for the commission, but I hope it's not their will that our students are educated by a remote teacher. I still would like for us to get some data on what exactly we've gotten from these services for the last couple of 9 weeks, and what we're going to get going forward. There's a lot of learning loss that already happened, and I think it's important for us to know kind of where these kids are. I think, you know, Mr. Gaines, you mentioned CASE, but I think there's also, I think there were pre-tests and things like that that were also done by a lot of these Elevate teachers. So I would hope that we can maybe get that at an upcoming meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Mr. Howe?
I really want to echo and agree with Ms. Parker. Next year's budget, I don't want to see Elevate in it. That is my goal. And your goal too, I know. But that's one of, I think, our goals is, I mean, has this been a program that we have 100% supported? No. Has it become something we had to do just to struggle through this? Yeah, and I say struggle, and we're not the ones struggling. It's these students that are the ones that are struggling through this. So just going forward, I would like to make sure that this is just not a part of our budget anymore.
Okay, thank you. Are we good to move that to consent? Okay. Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was just looking right now to clarify. That would be bid 22019, right? To consent. Okay. Questions on the other ones? Mr. Moore.
What I was just saying, make sure you, any of the ones that are, the documents that don't need to move over, don't just copy them all over for the main meeting. Make sure, thank you.
Anything on these? Put them on consent or no? Okay, all except for number 1? Or, okay. All right, so all 4 of them, is that what I'm understanding? Okay, all 4 go to consent. Operations update, Mr. Perriman.
First thing, let me thank you guys for being here last week for our retreat. Good information came from that. We were invited to the county budget committee by the budget chair, and we are going on April 11th. Architects and all involved construction, everyone will be there to make a presentation to them. They will get the numbers that you got, and they reached out to us, so that's a good sign, at least on the front end, to say that they know some things may need to be addressed. You've got your normal reports there, your capital projects reports, training report, all your cost reports. I will say, please take time to go through the operational one-page update. This is the largest list of things that my folks have ever given me that are going on right now in our district. If you have been around our district, and in fact, just look down at the floor in front of you, there's a lot of work going on both inside and outside, a lot of transformations occurring, and my folks are working really hard, and it's showing right now with what's going on around the district. The first thing that we really need to address tonight is 3.4.22. You will, if you look at that, you've got a couple of attachments. One is just the 5-year plan that you updated. It's just there for information. The capital worksheet that's attached are all of the items that we have spoken about or that we in general normally place on a capital request to the county. This would include all of the items that are on your 5-year plan for building. This is the, I still left on there, and this is for you to decide whether we do it or not, asking them for $4 million in maintenance money. We did that last year. School buses are on there. August 8th of this year, school buses are going up $10,000 across the board. Still is outrageous, and we are finding that cost is shooting through. So you will see I've included 12 buses, and for the first time that number is topping $1.4 million. They usually hover a little below 100,000, and they are blowing that out of the water. We spoke with them today. Those are real numbers, and those are numbers that in the time to budget. Those are the things that we normally present to you when we do our capital request. Mr. Lukonen has new software this year. So once you give me direction on capital request, it goes into that software, and it ranks, giving it a year in which it needs to be funded. And you see on that document, I gave you a column in the yellow. This would be an example of when we think this was just staff saying we think this is when funding needs to be asked for these projects. But what I have to have before April is over is a capital projects request to the Financial Advisory Board for them to consider, and I do have to have funding years for those. I'm not asking you for those tonight. I'm giving this to this. I may, if you allow me to, when you do your special call, either next week or at our board meeting in April, we can have discussion and actually get down to years in which you want to ask for funding for that. But this is just the start of that conversation, and that information is there for you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. Mr. Moore.
For those of you that missed the retreat, and I do appreciate some information, I like the discussion that we were having there about moving towards an annual request based on needs. And I don't mean just a list of needs, because I think one of the things we keep getting into is we create a list. The list has dollar figures attached to each item, and then we end up having our funding body basically picking and choosing like it's a buffet of what they would like to fund, which is not their jobs. I'll just be honest. Our job is to determine the needs of the school system, and their job is to decide to fund it or not. I like, as you discussed, how other districts have moved towards a direction of the fact that we are going to have ongoing needs every year, that we move towards just a dollar figure that we need to request, and then we have a list of things that we're going to try to get through based on the information we have currently of what we can attack on that list. But I would really like to move away from having an itemized list with dollar figures attached to each one. Now, we would still know what those are, and I guess if somebody really wanted to break it apart, they could. But I think how we present it needs to be moving in the other direction to just cover the fact that we do have needs, and those needs to be met with that dollar figure. And we, as a school board, are charged with making those dollars go as far as we can with the needs we have. So, I mean, I don't know how we get there. I'm sure the first time we present that's going to be a fun endeavor. But I think that's something we as a board need to be moving towards.
We've been having ongoing conversation with the Budget Committee Chair on the County Commission, and that has been our message, is that given what we're seeing and the growth that is occurring in our county, we are no longer going to be in the trend of, say in 01, we're opening Mount Pleasant Middle School, and then in 5 or 6 we're opening Marvin Wright, and then in 10 we're opening Spring, about every 5 years. We don't see the trend in the future being a big ask, and then you got 4 or 5 years to pay on that, and then there's another big ask. What we're seeing is that there's going to have to be some sort of continual funding in place every year. And our conversation with him is that is a dramatic mind shift change, and that is a dramatic change in how the county and the district are doing business. And so we didn't just like all in throw a huge spreadsheet at them and go, we need this much this year, and this, because we just think that's such a change that we have to talk through that. I'm hoping that on the 11th, as part of that presentation, when it comes to them, that is the conversation that kind of grows out of that presentation. That is definitely a conversation he and I are having multiple times over the last month. And he understands that. It's just kind of changing how a commission as a whole sees the funding. But we see, and if you look at the request, I mean, it's $159 million worth of requests over this, and most of it's over 5 years. And we see that delaying funding pushes things off greatly. A school that they would fund, let's say they funded the elementary school that's listed this year. That's a 25 start date. So you're really building out and finding land and those things. So we're hopefully going to have that full conversation with them on top of what you guys were presented last week. He's open to that, how far that goes with the whole group, and how quickly it progresses. But I do think that's the wave that you guys see, and I think that they kind of know is coming as well.
Ms. Parker.
Mr. Perryman, I saw in there the Mount Pleasant Elementary School addition. Is that with the hope of moving 5th grade back
That was based off of the plan that was approved in December or January, and that was with fifth grade moving back. Obviously, as we move forward with you guys, if you're committed to that, that's why I put that on there, if that changes at any point. But yes, ma'am, that would be the wing that would house the fifth grade and move them back over from the middle school.
Okay. I will just say, I mean, the date on that is 2025, and for me, that would be a much higher priority.
And again, those
I know that you
yeah.
just, but this is for discussion, so I'm just discussing my feelings on that. And I feel like one of the things that we as a board have talked about is the benefits of that, why we thought that was a good thing. We also got a lot of information recently from case assessment and whatnot about where these gaps are showing up, and particularly having problems in fifth grade, and I just don't want us to lose sight of that. And while we have that information, I hope that we give them a full picture of why we're making a request like that, so that they know that I know what you're saying as far as cost to start a school, but I think there's also cost for our students in delaying something like this too, and I think we need to be very upfront and honest with them about that as well.
Please remember, per y'all's conversation and direction in the past, this 5-year plan is going to come back to you in June. So rather than it being a year before we revisit it, it's coming back every 6 months, and we'll send it back to them every 6 months. I will tell you, I got a new neighborhood today from the county, not from the city, and it's not huge, but it is growth, and it is growth in an area that's really not expected. So, you know, if you say 10 houses way out one of our arteries, that's equivalent to 30 or 40 in town sometimes. But when we bring that back, I think you will see we've seen trends changing, and we will certainly, as you guys discuss, list this out as can be. The good thing about Doug's software is that can be manipulated as you guys talk about it, and we can change the ideas. His software is pretty neat. We'll talk to you about that at that time, because we'll be able to follow projects all the way through, and we'll be able to update them with pictures. So as this new school goes up, we can add this to this software, and the general public will be able to go in and watch the progress of this, see what the timeline is, not just for the schools, but for any projects that we do that would be funded out of capital.
Just an additional note to what you're saying, I heard today that Mount Pleasant has approved 200 new houses just within the last little bit. So as we look at changes in growth, that's coming.
We have 2 big neighborhoods in Mount Pleasant on our radar right now.
One other thing too, and I know we approved the, it's got a big, I like the stamp, by the way, a nice big colorful stamp. January 4th on the 5-year plan. Do we need to bring this back to re-look at costs, or can we set this up where you guys basically adjust the cost as needed?
That would be.
Well, I'm sorry. Just to go into that, because after discussions of last week, I don't see that it's appropriate. I would think that if this board has approved the projects, staff would have the liberty to be able to adjust these prices as you guys see fit, because clearly I think some of these numbers are probably already need to be adjusted based on new information we've gotten in the last few weeks.
Mr. Hall and I had this conversation this afternoon, so my ask would be, as we move forward with this, would you rather estimated cost on your end, kind of on the front end until something actually goes for a request, be just kind of always in flux, something that's not necessarily part of that document? You're adopting the items on the document, but understanding that the price can change. One thing you will see too is we kind of discussed through this today, and we added to, if you look at the worksheet, a land purchase line.
Okay.
Because we feel like that probably on the elementary schools themselves, we still feel that we can build that building for that amount of money, but we can't purchase land and build that building. And one of the things we've talked about with you guys before, and then with the commission as well, is kind of being nimble with purchases. And if there is money already designated as land purchase money, then that speeds that process up. You guys know that as a government entity, if we look at land, lots of times it gets a lot more expensive by the time actions can be taken, or it sells before an action can be taken for someone that's willing to sell it to you, but just at a different rate than what you looked at it at. So that's why we added that line. But yes, those numbers, if you guys would just agree with us that we adopted the list and we understand the estimated cost is always in flux, then we're happy to adjust that.
That would be where I would be looking at this. I mean, and then obviously, like you said, before it actually goes anywhere outside of just the document, we would approve any final numbers from there.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
The next item under us tonight is the Battle Creek land conveyance. You remember this came to you in the fall, and we had discussion as to actually where the line would go. We have worked with, and we spoke to Chairman Morrow on the front end. He gave us permission to work with the Parks Department as to looking at where that line would be probably most feasible and most useful for both entities. We have decided that the line would be in the center of the creek. We would have half the creek, they would have half the creek. That would never put us having to clean up things on their side because it's our creek, and they would never put them having to clean up things on our side because it's their creek. So we would split the creek. This still gives them, in the land transfer to the commission, 87.88 acres. And this would be mainly the land that's on the elementary side of the property. There are 17 acres around the elementary school that we would control. All the land under the road as well would go to them from Maylon Moore all the way to Hummingbird. So we feel like that this still meets the commitment that we had to the to the county in exchange for the bridge, and Parks Department is happy with this, and this would benefit us as well. So we just need to know if you guys approve it. There is a map attached. If you approve that this okay, we will work with the civil to make sure that the legal description is attached as well to match this. We did not want to ask them to do the legal description and then there have to be a change.
Okay, we're moving it to consent.
The next item, 3.424, the Duck River Electric Battle Creek easement request. I brought this to you tonight for transparency. Duck River reached out to me and said we would like to have an easement on this property to put in a secondary line that would provide backup power to those two schools in an emergency. My concern with this is you just put on consent transferring the property in which this easement would be on to the county. And I don't really know that we need to commit to giving an easement on someone else's land, but I did not want to leave it off. I did not want anyone to say I didn't bring this to you, but my recommendation would be just to table this item, and then as this transfers to the county, we will transfer this request to the county, if that's okay.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
I just wanted to say, these are overhead lines?
They are overhead lines.
I would hope for anybody at the county that once they get this property that's listening would please consider putting overhead lines in and around schools where we may be talking about potential parkland or other public access. I would hope that they wouldn't be looking to do this. It's kind of an unsightly thing to put in a otherwise nice piece of property.
We will make sure we convey that to the parks director and his assistant.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Could I play devil's advocate for a second? You've agreed to convey this property over, but you didn't say what it may or may not be encumbered by. If this is a line that benefits the school system, you might want to negotiate this easement out and get this taken care of before you convey the property over. I know that's my way of looking at it, is that you may want to get the line that you want that benefits your schools and gives you some backup power before you convey the property over. You're going to give a quitclaim deed, which makes no warranty of title. I hate to see the school system lose out on something that at least Duck River deems to be necessary in the event the county didn't want the line that they wanted to put in.
We sort of talked about that, as Mr. Hall has stated. He kind of thinks it's irrelevant to us. It's more of a benefit to them. Power goes down, we can get power up quicker. But we didn't see this as something that can hold up. But if you do, we certainly can back off. And we just kind of also committed to the county that we needed to, in the early part of this year, get this in front of them. I can present this to them all at the same time. I can take direction however you want us to do that.
Ms. Irvin.
I hate to sound ignorant here, but how would it not benefit us? I mean, will we already have our reserves in place with all of that? This is just a secondary. I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, I'm not reading why it would not benefit us.
The first thing is it just kind of goes to the pump station and dies.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go from one school to the other. There's no drawing that shows that actually it attaches to our buildings at any point. I'm sure they could clarify that to us, but if you look at the drawing, it just comes off of one of their existing poles, runs the length of Battle Creek Way, crosses the bridge, and ends. It doesn't end at a site, it doesn't end at a field, it just ends. So they could clarify that for us, and I guess this is a simpleton answer. You know, you won't miss what you didn't have. We haven't really had huge power outages at any of our schools that have made it inoperable at any time. And so a lot of our schools don't necessarily have that backup line, and we seem to operate okay. But I'll pass it off. He's eager to speak over here.
I think what they usually do in these situations when they get bigger buildings and stuff come in, and even with neighborhoods, right now we've got a line that we're getting fed from the Malin Moore side. There's another line that comes in. It's not off of Hummingbird. It's another one of those roads, but it's coming from a different direction. So what they're trying to do now is bring lines kind of down to that pump station, to the bridge, and get ready, because they'll probably be bringing one from the Hummingbird side down to that. And then they put this, I'll just call it a big switch. So if we were to lose power on the Malin Moore side, they could open up that switch, close the switch over there, and still transfer power to the schools, or likewise go the other way. So it's really just a benefit for them to be able to divert power as necessary.
Okay.
All right, let me just ask this. If we hold the land and allow the lines to be put in, if we're the ones that are in control of that land, do we have a say-so over whether or not they're overhead lines versus buried?
I don't think so. Duck River is primarily an overhead conveyor of power lines.
Okay. Mr. Howell.
Would this
the easement? This is not necessarily them saying they're going to put it there. I mean, they could elect that they have the easement, and in 5 or 10 years they put it there. I think their intent is to do it rather quickly. However, there's nothing that says that this current board may not be sitting by the time they would decide to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Could I on that topic? If you're granting the easement, you dictate the terms of the easement. So, certainly if it's the board's wish, you could say, well, I'll give you an easement, but only for an underground line. You wouldn't necessarily have to grant an easement that would give them the choice on that. Now, the flip side of that coin is they may decide, well, if it's your way or nothing, we'll decide on nothing. So I don't know how badly they want the line. I don't know how much it would benefit the schools. So, yes, you could put a provision like that in the easement, but that may change their mind as to whether they want the line or not.
That'd be fine with me.
Well, that sounds, I like putting the ball in their court, and if they choose to do that, that's fine. If they don't, then we're not out anything. My question was, would this in any way help our construction for the new high school? Would that be anything that came in off that way? Okay.
No. One thing we would have to do if we are going to hold up for an easement, I do have to have this line redrawn and acreage recalculated, and then that would have to come back to you guys before you agree to send it to the county. Would that not be correct?
The boundary lines wouldn't change. This would just be an easement that showed up. So you're still conveying the same property. The property just might be encumbered by an easement. And so you could stick with your current lines. But again, a lot of that depends on what you require as far as the easement goes. But no, I don't think it would actually affect the boundary line.
Would that be a situation where the county could refuse the property with that easement on it?
Yes, if they decided they didn't want the 80-some-odd acres with that one easement by the road, then yeah, theoretically they could say, no, we don't want it anymore.
And that was part of why we just felt it was cleanest to give it to them and let them address it, how they felt.
So, the only way that we can have any say-so or control of whether or not that's an overhead line or a buried line is for us to put an easement stating that it has to be a buried line. Personally, I'm not opposed to doing that. And if the county doesn't want the land, then, that's their prerogative to, then we have 87 acres to figure out what to do.
Can I just say from an operations side, I don't like committing, if they don't want the land, I wouldn't necessarily like committing to mowing the side of that road for the next 100 years. That's kind of, whatever, right?
Mr. Perryman, if, it is, real quick question. Right there by the pump station, between the bridge and the pump station, is that still would be our property under the new arrangement anyway? Am I correct on that? Are we following the property of the creek, correct?
The creek, that's the bridge. The line turns at the bridge and goes through, the creek and follows the creek around that.
So that piece would still be ours. It would be a separate easement at that point, actually, once the property is owned by two different property owners. So what I'm saying is if we just don't worry about this right now, table it, at the end of the day, we still own the last piece of property there between the pump station and the creek that we could decide whether we want something to be crossing that on our terms. So we can just let this sit, guys.
Is that okay with your schedule? I had a little different alternative plan, but is that better?
Whatever you guys want to do. We just promised the commission we would get this back before them in the early part of the year. We're kind of shifting out of the early part.
I think if we promise that, we do need to stick with that. One thing I would maybe see happening, and I can get shot down by anybody that wants to, I'd like to see us at least have this on our agenda for the April meeting. But in the meantime, I would like you to reach out to Al Ray and ask him if that easement's approved, would the county still take the land with underground wires, or underground lines?
And I can reach out to Duck River as well.
Yeah,
and say,
that'd
would
be
you
the
be
other
willing to do this?
Yeah. Is that agreeable to the board? Okay, let's go that route then.
Let me make sure I make that note real quick.
And, you know, if worse comes to worse, we could always take it off the agenda in April.
Okay. The next thing, you guys approved a use of facility policy earlier in the year. In that policy, kind of following suit with other districts, we moved the pricing of facility uses off of the policy into procedure. And we find that other districts are doing that because those prices can be adjusted and they can be moved about rather quickly. We would still notify you of that. We would still ask for direction on that, but it would not take a formal reading and then a policy change to do that. We met with Mr. Hooper and Ms. Parker, so that the board had a voice in this. We went through looking at procedures and we came up with this procedure. It technically, since it's a procedure, requires no action on your part unless you have issue with it. So it's just there as an FYI unless someone does want to discuss the procedures themselves.
Okay, Mr. Howell.
So, I don't know, I think it was simultaneously. So, I don't know if the rest of the board has been contacted by anybody, but I've been contacted by at least 6 to 8 different individuals, expressing some concern about this, and I have some concerns. So basically, there are multiple groups that use our facilities. Most all of them, I believe, are taxpayers. So I'm a little hesitant to exclude a bunch of people financially from using our facilities when they've already paid for them, in essence. I do take issue with groups outside groups coming in. I do think that it does need to be limited to Maury County groups. One church, for instance, would see an increase of their use fee of about 80%. It would go from $200 to roughly $1,000 a week. That's a huge increase, especially when you look at the benefits that those groups often bring to our schools. Various groups do different things. Various groups provide projects and services. I can tell you, last week, a Boy Scout group actually completed an Eagle Scout project at Culleoka with 3 very large, very heavy benches, and I know this because it was one of my son's project. But the churches often provide services to the schools. They have meals for teachers. They provide various supplies, they upgrade things in the actual schools operationally, the building itself. So, and I understand that there's cost associated with those groups coming in, and those groups, I think, take on that as well. But to see that a group is using $1,000 per week, or even $1,000 per month necessarily, I mean, what do we, is the goal to make money?
No.
Well, it kind of sounds like it. It really kind of sounds like it. I understand that there's, things break, things get painted. I'm just curious, maintenance-wise, if we do any more or less maintenance, whether we have 0 groups in a school or whether we have 50 groups in a school, I'd bet to say it's probably very negligible.
I would say the more people we have in a building, the more issues we do.
Sure,
correct.
the more issues that you could potentially have, absolutely. So, I mean, and I have no problems with us figuring out how to address those issues if something breaks, something like that. But I just think that just blanketing across the county, I mean, obviously you've got, for simplicity's sake, and I completely understand that, but you've got an auditorium on here for $275 per day. But, I'm sorry, 3 hours. So, I mean, you've got one school that has a particularly small auditorium versus, let's say Columbia Central, which is a particularly large auditorium. I don't know. I mean, if I have a capacity that holds 100 versus a capacity that holds 50 and it's a much newer, nicer building, there's some inequities at that point. So, I have some problems with the amounts that are here. And I think that's my biggest option. I would like to put this off to the actual board meeting so that these particular individuals and groups could come in and actually voice their opinions, voice their opposition. Why not have some community input into this situation since you're affecting community groups?
Mr. Ard, you may be able to answer this. Do we actually have to, are we able to take board action on this since it's a procedural thing?
No, like as far as
do we vote on the
you
amount?
don't vote on a procedure. You vote on a policy, but you can speak as
I can let you know I'm very unhappy with it.
Well, I will say this, and we went with surrounding districts, comparable spaces, and I will say, we spend an inordinate amount of time processing facility requests. I'm gonna sound ugly again, and I'm gonna be the one that says it. You don't get to rent the lobby of the courthouse because you pay taxes. You don't get to host something in the post office because you pay taxes. A lot of what we deal with, and there are provisions in the policy, there are provisions in the procedure that address groups like Boy Scouts, that address different groups. We don't have equitable facilities. If you want to just simply say, my office negotiates a price, that's the only way we could ever say, well, there's this much room and you're going to use it for this long and you're doing this. If we get into managing 23 sites and someone has to make a request, there has to be some sort of a standard. Now, you guys can give direction on where this is. We did reach out to board members for information, and I will say this. I've not had a call since this became a policy from any group. I've not fielded a phone call, and this became policy in the fall. Now, when the policy was enacted and it was stated there's going to be a procedure that follows that names a price, I've not received a call from anyone that said, can we come and talk to you? Where would we be? And so I understand that they oftentimes call you. I don't mean this to sound ugly. It's going to sound ugly. Take it how you will. You approve, you don't write. And so when they call you, it comes out in a meeting like this, and it's unproductive. When they call us, it becomes productive during the process. So we are happy to have discussion on this. We just wanted to make sure that you understood that this is kind of where we were when we looked at what you have and how we're
Well,
managing.
and that's what I wanted to get to is I mean, I can sit up here and complain about it all day, but in essence, you guys set the procedure. I can let you know that I'm not happy about it, but we're not gonna vote on this, so I don't know that us talking to you for an hour up here is gonna change anything. So I just wanted to let you know, I recognize that, our authority is limited in this discussion, but I do think you know the feelings of at least 3 of the board members. Ms. Parker.
As someone who served on the committee that worked with Eric on this, I actually just want to commend him, because when we came in and we sat down to talk with him about this, we had the old policy, we had the new policy, we had examples from other counties to look at. So the discussion about, the difference between, Cox and Whitthorne, or, Hampshire and Whitthorne, whatever, they don't do that in other counties. Like, I mean, you could get really detailed on this, but to be completely honest with you, on a lot of this, we don't want to necessarily have to be the lowest cost provider. If it costs somebody an extra $1,000 to be in our school, then that probably, I can see how that would be a deterrent for them. But that may mean that there's a better fit for them someplace else where it is going to be more economical. I think our job is to make sure that we are educating our kids. Our job is to make sure that we provide the opportunity for spaces. We differentiated between inside the building. We differentiated between outside of the building, which is something that we didn't always do as far as what we charge. I really think it was pretty thoroughly done. I'm happy to listen to constituents on, their thoughts about this, but as far as the process, I think that Mr. Perryman did a great job, and I support what he has put forward.
Thank you. Ms. Irvin.
So, maybe I operate a bit paranoid, but it's, I think, conditioning that I had from a prior field that we had worked in. I think of this a little bit differently. It's easy for your views to be swayed when you hear from constituents, but the way I look at this is our number one job is to educate kids, but also to keep those kids safe. Honestly, I really don't like outside public groups coming into our schools, because even though we have a person administering over that, it's hard to watch. You're inviting the public in, and I just can't help but think of this from a potential safety hazard. And two, I mean, I do not want our schools to become, personally, I don't think our schools should become a regular place of business. Even if it is a nonprofit business, it should not become a regular place of business. So, like Kristen said, I do feel like they should be open for events and things, but I mean, but a church, I mean, where I worship at, they have to find a building and pay for that. So that also comes a cost of operation, and two, we could get into discriminatory practices. So I don't have a problem with this at all. As a matter of fact, I worry anytime we open the public up without the proper supervision as to what could come into our schools and be hiding in certain places. So we cannot forget that safety aspect as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hooper.
So, like it's been said, I did help with this. We went off a couple different counties, Williamson, Wilson, and I think Rutherford, maybe. And I have those papers in my car, but I think what I've been hearing is that there needs to be some input, and I'd like for that to be done publicly. So we can't actually do a vote or anything about this, but I think we could put on our next meeting, at the real meeting, a review of the current policy that's attached with this, to at least give the people who want to come and speak about it the option to speak about that specifically, and then we can move forward with there. But I think the desire to be heard is what we're being asked for, and I think that's what we should at least attempt to give them.
I would say that I see those public comment sessions as more of a opportunity for them, because they do address the board. They don't address staff. So I would be just a little hesitant to start opening up our public discussions to a discussion between staff and general citizens who are concerned about an issue. That's something that can be done through the week, by phone, by email. I appreciate what you're saying, and agree to you to a certain extent, and maybe I'm thinking selfishly as somebody who will have to manage the circus if we do that, I could see that going off the rails pretty quick. So let's give a little thought to that, I guess would be my suggestion on at least the opening it up on the agenda. Ms. Ventura?
My staff member just said he has received 0 calls.
Okay.
So send those calls our way. I mean, that's the way for us to hear those public delegations.
Yeah.
And if we are flooded, we will ask to put that on the board so that you can then hear that. And I think that might be a rush to put it on the agenda and open that up
Yeah, I
for
think that
something
would
you
be the
can't vote on.
appropriate channels to go through to address the staff.
So every service this Sunday, I'll give you my number. It might just be easier to text than to do that.
All right. Anyway, let's move on to Mr. Howell.
So, and that was actually what I was about to say. Then we can do that. Those can be directed towards you. They contacted us because we're the elected official. We're their direct liaison. We're their direct representative. So that's why they contacted us. I didn't contact you because I didn't feel it necessarily appropriate, but I can forward you the emails, and I'm sure that those people will contact you as well. But I want to push back a little bit. This is a procedure right here. We can change that real quick. We can go back to that policy, and we can revisit that policy, and we can change all of this and make it all policy. That's not necessarily the route I want to go, but I'm willing to go that route if we don't get some resolution. Because like I said, these groups, we're not talking about a nonprofit entity. Just a nonprofit. We're talking about groups that provide services to our teachers and staff, to our schools themselves. These are our communities. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm a community school advocate, but it's more than just fees. It's more than just opening it up to the community. That's what makes schools great, is that they're available for everything all the time. Security issues, I'm not sure. I don't see that at all. Liability issues, I see very little. These groups have to have insurance. We have insurance. I can remember going to various groups in these schools and never having a major issue. And trust me, security is a big thing of mine. I'm a big police officer. Security is something I'm familiar with. But I don't know. I would just urge you to relook at these things.
Thank you very much. I don't see any.
Can I say one last thing?
If it's quick, you can.
I'm gonna be real blunt. None of y'all called me about this either.
I wasn't called to be on the committee either.
I know, but no one said, "Hey, let's think about this." I will field phone calls. I feel like that's probably what you just tied me up to do for the next little bit, and that's fine. However, I need direction from you. Someone calls a landlord and says, "I think your apartment's too high, I'm not going to rent it." Does that change the price of the apartment? I need you to tell me whether that is or not. And I'm going to say this. If you feel that this is a board decision on these prices, then I would say this needs to go back and go into policy. Because if it's procedure, I feel like that at any point in time from now moving forward, someone's not going to like that. And someone's not going to be okay with that. We do have to pay the folks that work these events. We do have to clean these buildings. We do have to keep up maintenance on these buildings. As a staff member, I'm looking at the district's interest in these buildings. If you choose and you want to control that, I am more than happy for this to go back into policy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore.
Board members, we've had this on our agenda. If anybody has any suggestions for dollar figures or how they want to change it, or if they want it to go into policy, you're welcome to put it as a motion on that. Otherwise, I'm happy for this to be the way it is. It looks like you guys put work into it. I don't have any dollar figures that I feel like are better than what's here, and in light of that, I'm fine with it staying the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howe.
So, in order for it to be put into a motion, it would need to be on the agenda next voting meeting, correct?
We don't vote on this.
If we want to change policy and change
policy, then would
and change procedure, then
I think we usually run policy through work sessions, do we not? So
I
it'd be on the
Correct,
April
it would
work
be on the
session.
April work session for the May board meeting.
Let me. I think we're at the point where we realize we don't have control over this. It's a procedure. turn that over to the staff. I will say I tend to look at what Mr. Howell is saying, simply because this is one of the policies anyway, that affects the public in general, even folks that don't have kids in our school system. So that's where I could see that coming in a little bit. As elected officials, we're responsible to those folks as well. And I didn't call you and let you know my thoughts on it simply because I've made them known the last 2 board meetings this has come up, my thoughts on them. So that's why you didn't get a phone call from me, but I'd be happy to call you during the week. And I also wasn't invited to the committee to have a say-so in it. So I think we're at the point where we really can't do anything else. And until maybe April, Mr. Howe sounds like he's got some ideas. So thank you for your work. And I will say, and I'll echo what Ms. Parker said, all the work is very thorough. I don't doubt that you guys did your research at all. And I appreciate the hard work you put into it. Everybody, Ms. Parker, Mr. Hooper, for being on that committee. Certain extent, I'm glad I wasn't invited, quite honestly. Let's move on then.
3.4.31, this is a USETPA cooperative agreement. Tommy can speak to this.
Okay.
The next one, Board Audiovisual Solutions, we did bid out a new system for this room. We did bid, the Champs was the low bid. That is the system that the County Commission uses. With your approval, we'll process that, and this room will be upgraded to have the same capabilities for streaming and for videoing meetings and recording votes that they will have.
Okay, thank you. Consent for that one as well?
And that's us.
Thank you. Policy. Nothing?
It got moved to the next
It
time.
did, you're right. Under, I have a few announcements that I just want to bring up. Or do you have something else?
Oh, I did just put on there as an FYI, it was a update for ESS, which is the substitute company. It was kind of a 90-day update, and then I included the next little bit, because they had given it to us after the last work session in February. I will also say, to be fair as well, please note the amount of COVID that we had during the first 90 days of ESS. We had a lot of COVID. I'm sure everyone's aware of that. So we're kind of down, actually, I don't want to jinx us, but low numbers of staff having COVID. So I think from now to the end of the school year, already we're seeing 60% fill rates across the district, which district-wide, and some schools are outliers and stuff. But we have been able to get some subs at Cox, Whitthorne, and Central that have been schools that, we specifically said, please try to get extra people in these buildings, and they have been able to do that. They've been doing some gift baskets, some other kind of incentives for their employees to help fill those vacancies in some of our harder-to-fill schools. And it is an increase from where we were last year, from what I believe. So just so you guys are aware, I just wanted to put that up there for you guys.
Thank you. A couple of reminders. The Teacher of the Year award ceremony is this Thursday night at Central High School, I believe in the cafeteria, if I'm not mistaken, 6 o'clock. Come support the teachers. We have a special called meeting the 22nd. We scheduled that earlier this meeting. Hopefully you haven't forgot already. And then I want to thank the board members, because the salary study discussion is one that really needed to be had and needed to be had thoroughly. I don't want anybody to think I was discounting the value of that discussion. I think it's given us good momentum and good guidance as we go into the budget planning process, which you and I need to get together and discuss a date. And also, I want to publicly take the opportunity to thank the central office staff. Obviously, there's been some transition, and there's been a lot of people stepping up and just filling gaps and helping support Ms. Ventura, helping support our teachers, administrators, other supervisors. And I just want to publicly thank you guys, as well as all the principals and teachers. So, Ms. Ventura, you have your light on.
Thank you. And you said two of the things I wanted to say. First of all, I did want to publicly say I have felt nothing but welcomed and supported, and that has been wonderful. Teacher of the Year, yes, 6 p.m. at Central on Thursday night. And then you'll notice in the announcement, March 30th, I have been made aware that and I think you all received a letter from Shirley actually about how awful the stairs are at central office. So those will be repaired, therefore no one can get to the second floor, so we're going to work from home on that day, and I just wanted to make sure that you saw that.
Thank you very much. Did you have something you wanted? Okay. With that, we will stand adjourned until next meeting.